I was still in the black clothes from the funeral, the scent of lilies and white chrysanthemums still lingering on my sleeves, as if they hadn't had time to fade away. Less than a week after Alexander, my husband, was laid to rest, this house was completely different. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses echoed from the living room, without a single hint of sadness. I stood in the doorway, looking across the great hall. On the antique chairs, the mahogany tables, the bookshelves, everywhere, there were colorful paper notes stuck on them. Lime green, lemon yellow, neon pink. Mine. Keep. To the cabin. Each color of paper was like a mark of occupation. Jason, my elder nephew, held a stack of sticky notes and a marker, moving around the room like a showroom attendant. His eyes lit up as he stuck another note on the antique record player, the wedding gift that Alexander and I had chosen together at a small shop in Florence. His sister, Chloe, held up her phone, opening an interior design app, and scanned the living room with the camera. We're going to knock down this wall and expand it into an entertainment room. Brighter, more open, as long as she's out of here. Me. No one looked at me when they said that. It was as if I was just a ghost who had wandered into their space. Clarissa, my son's wife, appeared with a tray of champagne glasses, her smile as brilliant as if this were the launch party for a new Rainstech product, not a recent funeral. "We're celebrating Alex's legacy," she said, handing a glass to each person. In the corner of the room, someone dropped a line. "And getting rid of the old ghosts." The laughter that followed was sharp and cold. I turned my eyes to the long dining table. My hand-carved oak chair was gone, replaced by a cold steel folding chair, one leg bent. "You can sit in the old technical room in the basement. It's quieter," someone said, as if giving an order. I nodded, not saying a word. The technical room, where Alexander had once set up the company's first servers. Now it was empty, with only dust-covered cable marks on the walls. A flickering, sickly yellow light bulb hung from the ceiling. In the corner, the old shelf for circuit boards was still there, and among the cold metal shelves was a small safe that no one had noticed. I sat down on the folding chair, my back against the cold wall. The voices from upstairs echoed down. "She only knows how to cook soup and plant a few dead flowers." He was the genius. I placed my hand on the safe. A thin layer of dust covered the steel surface. I knew that beneath that dust was something they never expected. And it was something that would change everything. The lock clicked with a familiar sound as I turned the correct combination. My hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but because those numbers had been stored in my memory for 15 years, without a single mistake. The steel door opened, and the smell of old paper escaped like a gentle breath. Inside were 3 things. 1. The co-founder certificate for Rainstech, with the signatures of Alexander and mine, Alara Voss Rains, in blue ink with a firm, decisive stroke. 2. A silver-gray leather, bound notebook with the initials E. Sinclair embossed on the corner. The pages inside were densely filled with handwritten symbols, system diagrams, and command lines, the foundation of the Sentinel Protocol, the cybersecurity software that had saved the company from bankruptcy. 3. A yellow envelope, sealed, with a single line written on the outside. "Keep until you can no longer stay silent." I opened the notebook. My handwriting was still the same, strong, clear, and uncompromising. I remembered the small hotel room in San Jose, where I had spent several nights hunched over the desk, writing every line of code to patch a security vulnerability that Alexander's engineering team couldn't fix. They called this project the Suicide Mission, because it was to secure a $40 million government contract. If it failed, Rainstech would disappear. I couldn't let Alex's hard work and our entire life crumble into dust. But I also knew that if the proposal was under my name, the board would reject it immediately. Women, especially the CEO's wife, were not allowed in the tech executive room, at least not in the world we lived in. So I sent the entire proposal by mail, using the pseudonym E. Sinclair. Alex presented it as if it were his. The project succeeded, the company was saved, and I vanished from the story, as if I had never touched a keyboard. Alexander once said he would give me justice, at the right time. But that time never came. Not until he died, and our children and grandchildren started tearing this house apart, treating me like an outdated object. I put the notebook into my handbag, along with the co-founder certificate. I didn't open the yellow envelope, not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to save that moment when I would open it in front of everyone, so they would see that I was not just the homemaker in their story. The sound of footsteps echoed down the stairs. Jason peeked his head in, frowning when he saw me sitting in the empty room. "What are you looking for, Grandma?" "The things you will never find," I replied, my voice calm. He shrugged and left. The basement door closed, leaving me with the sickly yellow light bulb and the smell of metal. I knew that from this moment on, I was no longer just the one who endured. I had begun. I called Miles from the old landline in the basement. No one in the family bothered to keep a working mobile phone for me. They, accidentally, cut the service when they merged the family accounts, then said that I probably didn't need it anymore anyway. Miles answered almost immediately. His voice was still as deep and steady as it had been 15 years ago. "Are you ready?" he asked. "More than ever," I replied. That afternoon, when I went upstairs to get some tea, I saw them gathered around the dining table. Jason was handing Clarissa a printed list from the computer. Liquidation list. I glanced over it. A Bechstein piano, oil paintings in Alex's study, a collection of mechanical watches. All were marked sell or give to the cabin. A bat. Clarissa smiled as if she had just found a bargain. "The leather swivel chair in Alex's room would be perfect for your new office, Jason. And those old servers, just get rid of them. She wouldn't know how to use them down there anyway." Chloe, my niece, sat with her legs crossed on a chair, her crimson nails tapping on her iPad screen. "She doesn't need a lot of stuff. More things are just dangerous. Old people trip and fall. Get rid of some things for safety." "Oakley." The whole table burst into laughter. I stood there for a few seconds, looking at each familiar yet estranged face. My son, Nathan, said nothing to stop them. He just bowed his head and continued eating, as if I had vanished from the room. When the laughter subsided, I went back to the basement, pulled the small safe near the only power outlet, and plugged in the old scanner. It took over an hour to digitize every page: the co-founder certificate, the Sentinel Protocol notebook, and some bank documents related to the personal investments I had made in the company. That evening, I met Miles at a cafe 3 blocks from the house. I chose this place because my family hated it, calling it a den of failed startups. Miles arrived with a secure laptop and an external hard drive. He entered the data into a handwriting analysis system. The screen showed a comparison between the handwriting in the notebook and the E. Sinclair patent file stored at the Intellectual Property Office. 100% match. "You're not just a co-founder, Alara. Legally, you are the sole author of the technology that has brought in over $12 million a year for Rains Tech. And no document has ever been filed to transfer the rights." I smiled. For the first time in months, my lips didn't tremble. We agreed. Miles would keep a digital copy in 3 different locations. My lawyer, Lydia Tran, would prepare the files to be sent directly to the Intellectual Property Court and the Trust Fund Management Office. I just needed to wait for the right moment. And that moment would be the reading of the will, where they all thought they had won. 3 days before the will reading, I sent a series of messages to the family group chat, the group they had almost never included me in. The message was short, just one sentence. "Tomorrow evening, 7 p.m., dinner at the house. We need to discuss the inheritance and future plans." Less than 10 minutes later, the responses came pouring in. "Are you throwing a goodbye party?" Jason. "Great. I'll bring the champagne." Clarissa. "I hope you know you can't live alone for much longer." Chloe. I read them all, but didn't reply. I spent the next day preparing the dining room. Not preparing food. I ordered catering from a fancy restaurant that I knew they liked, because they wouldn't be suspicious if the bait was good enough. What I was preparing was a trap. The dining table was covered with a white tablecloth, and the chairs were neatly arranged. In the middle of the table, instead of flowers, I placed a long wooden box, and inside was a file binder with a black cover, stamped Copy, Share Allocation Agreement. I had printed some harmless pages with only a header and a fake consent to transfer signature. The bait. On each chair, I left a small envelope. When opened, inside was the projected asset distribution, all fabricated numbers, intentionally inflated to stimulate their greed. At exactly 7 p.m., they arrived, the whole family. Clarissa wore a red dress, her high heels clacking on the wooden floor with every step, holding a bottle of Dom Perignon as if she had just signed a multi-million-dollar contract. Jason followed, a confident smile on his face, pulling a chair to sit near me, but not out of a desire to be close to his mother, but because this seat was facing the wooden box. Chloe trailed behind with Nathan, my son, whispering something and giggling. "Oh, so you do know how to have a serious dinner," Clarissa began, her voice half compliment, half sarcasm. "Yes, I want everyone to have clear information," I replied, pouring myself a glass of water. The dinner took place with the smell of steak and red wine sauce, but the conversation at the table did not revolve around memories of Alex. "I'm going to take the old servers to make a recording studio," Jason announced. "And I'm going to knock down the wall in Alex's study to open up more space. My apartment will become an event venue," Clarissa added. Chloe scrolled through her iPad, showing Nathan pictures of a living room renovation with Italian furniture. "She doesn't need a big space, Dad. She can just stay in the technical room forever." Nathan didn't look at me, just gave a slight nod, as if he was approving a financial plan. When dessert was served, I opened the wooden box and pushed the file binder to the center of the table. "This is a copy of the share and asset distribution, according to Alex's wishes," I said, intentionally using the present tense to keep their attention. Clarissa was the first to open it. Her eyes quickly scanned the numbers, and a smirk played on her lips. Jason reached for the file, and Chloe stood up to get a better look. The whole table began to murmur. "More than I thought. This trust fund, can we split it before the announcement? If we handle it cleverly, we can transfer the money without waiting for the will." I sat still, gently swirling my cup of tea. No one asked why I had these documents, or why I was showing them in advance. To them, information was just a commodity. The sooner they owned it, the easier it was to manipulate. Clarissa turned to Nathan. "If we get our own lawyer to do the paperwork beforehand, she won't have time to react." I raised my head, looking directly into my son's eyes. Nathan avoided my gaze, looking down at his dessert spoon. I knew, deep down, he understood what I was doing. But greed, once it has taken root, is often stronger than memory. When the dinner ended, each person left with their own envelope. They thought they had just gained the upper hand before the game even began. None of them knew that each of those envelopes was the very map that would lead them into the legal trap I had set. Tomorrow, they would arrive at the will reading with the confidence of someone about to celebrate a victory, and that would be the moment when the chair beneath them would disappear. The meeting room at Lydia Tran's law office was cold and gleaming, all glass and steel. Outside, a fine rain fell, the drops sliding down the large glass pane like cold lines drawn across a gray sky. I was arranged to sit at the end of the table, on a makeshift folding chair. Clarissa glanced at my chair and whispered to Chloe, "At least it suits her better than these leather chairs." Chloe covered her mouth, giggling, her eyes darting down to her phone. Jason was leaning back in his chair, twirling a pen in his hand, as if waiting to sign a new contract. Nathan avoided my eyes, but I noticed his hands were trembling slightly. Lydia walked in, placing a thick stack of files on the table. Beside her was Miles, neatly dressed, carrying a secure briefcase. No one else in the room knew Miles would be here. "We shall begin," Lydia said, her voice even. At first, there were the usual provisions: debts, charitable funds, and small bequests. The table was silent, with only the sound of paper turning. Clarissa raised an eyebrow, letting out a as she saw the small, trickling numbers. Then Lydia stopped, took out a small device, and placed it in the middle of the table. "Mr. Alexander Rains has left a voice recording, which he requested to be played at this meeting." The quiet press of a button echoed softly, and Alex's voice filled the room. Deeper, slower than I remembered, but every word was clear. "If anyone in my family has ever said anything insulting to Alara Rains, subtract $1 million for each phrase." The sound of Jason's pen hitting the table was dry and sharp. Chloe let out a scoff, but her laughter died when Lydia pressed the button again. A large screen on the wall lit up, showing a video secretly recorded from the security camera in the living room 3 days after the funeral. The images were clear. Clarissa raising a champagne glass, smiling. Get rid of the old ghosts. Jason sticking a mind note on the record player. She doesn't use it. Chloe, go down to the technical room for safety so you don't trip. Nathan, silent, sitting at the table, but nodding in agreement. Each phrase, each word, appeared with the amount of money being deducted running down the corner of the screen. Total, 84 million. The air in the room became thick, no longer smelling of expensive perfume, only of fear. That's not all, Lydia said, her eyes sweeping across the table. As per Mr. Alexander's request, we are announcing the sole author of the Sentinel Protocol patent, the main source of Rainstech's profits for the past 15 years. Miles stepped up, placing the silver-gray leather notebook in the middle of the table. The screen showed a comparison of the handwriting and the E. Sinclair file from the Intellectual Property Office. 100% match. The author, Lydia said slowly, is Alara Voss Rains. Jason jumped up, his chair scraping back. No way! That's my father's company. It is also the company I co-founded, I replied, my voice not loud, but clear enough for the whole room to hear. Clarissa gripped her husband's hand, but her eyes still darted towards the notebook, as if she wanted to snatch it. Chloe sat frozen, her lips pressed together until they were white. Nathan finally looked up, at me. His eyes were red, but I didn't know if it was from shame or anger. Lydia opened the yellow envelope that I had kept for 15 years. Inside was a handwritten letter from Alex. She is the reason the company exists. I asked her to be silent, because the board would not accept a woman leading the project. But I knew. I always knew. She is not just my wife. She is the brain that saved this entire family. No one said a word. Outside, the rain was falling harder. I slowly pulled the folding chair back and stood up. You all treated me like an old object, but the very thing you live off of was written by my own hands. I turned to Lydia. Is there anything else? Just one thing, she smiled. All ownership rights, profits from the patent, and real estate belong to you. I took the files and walked out. Behind me, I heard Clarissa's voice breaking apart. No, you can't. Jason slammed his hand on the table, and Nathan called out Mom once, but I didn't turn back. Because today, for the first time in many years, I didn't have to turn back anymore. The official notice was sent that afternoon. Lydia drafted the document on the law office's letterhead, stamped with a red seal with bold letters. As per the court's ruling and the will of Mr. Alexander Rains, all individuals not named as legal heirs must vacate the property at 401 Rains Estate Drive Ive within 48 hours, starting from 9 a.m. tomorrow. I added a single handwritten sentence at the bottom in slanted script. Give everything back, including what you thought was yours. The next morning, the mansion that had been filled with laughter was now filled with the sound of boxes being packed and suitcases scraping on the wooden floor. Jason walked past me in the hallway, carrying a box of electronics, his eyes darting away as if I were a stranger. Clarissa was still in her silk pajamas, her hair uncombed, her lips pressed together, as she packed and snapped at Chloe. Careful, that's not yours. Put it down, put it down. I immediately recognized the ceramic vase Chloe was holding from the living room. It was a wedding gift from my parents in Paris. I walked over, not saying a word, just holding out my hand. She hesitated for a second, then placed the vase in my hand, as if throwing away a heavy object. Nathan found me in the kitchen, standing in the empty space where the dining table had been. Mom, I looked straight into his eyes. You nodded. I'm just doing what you told me to. He swallowed hard, his eyes cast down. Perhaps for the first time in his life, he realized that silence has a price, and today he paid with everything. I walked through each room. I peeled off every note that said, mine, folded them in half, and threw them into the trash. The pink one on the piano, the blue one on Alex's reading chair, the yellow one on our wedding photo frame. They didn't know that each of those papers was like a fingerprint of arrogance, and I was wiping them clean. The living room was silent now. No more conversations about renovations, no more mixing of perfume and ready-made meal smells. Only the light slanting through the curtains, shining on a thin layer of dust on the floor. I went into the garden. The patch of land behind the house was where Alex and I had planted all sorts of things, but Clarissa had all the roses pulled up to set up an outdoor banquet area. In the corner of the yard, the almond tree still stood, with its rough trunk and branches that shaded a small patch of soil where I had planted a sapling when Nathan was 5. Now, the sapling was just a thin trunk, with yellowed leaves. I knelt down, my knees touching the cool tiled floor, and took the old watering can from the shed. The water flowed down into the dry soil, sounding like someone swallowing to quench a great thirst. I whispered, "You will bloom again. Not for them, but for yourself." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying a new stillness. Not the stillness of loss, but of reclamation. 48 hours later, the iron gate closed behind their cars, laden with belongings. Not a single word of farewell, not a kind glance. And I didn't need one. I stood on the doorstep, looking at the empty yard, feeling as if the whole house had just exhaled after a years-long suffocation. Tomorrow, I will decide whether to keep or sell this place. But today is the day I walk through each room, as if reintroducing myself to the walls. There are no more of their voices, no more mine notes. Now, everything is mine, truly. I sold the mansion the following spring, not out of anger or to erase memories, but because those walls had heard too many lies, too many scornful laughs. There are some houses, no matter how beautiful, that contain too many echoes to ever become quiet again. My new apartment is on a high floor of a building in Santa Barbara, overlooking the sea. Each morning, waves gently lap against the shore. The wind carries the smell of salt, and light fills the room. No more creaking wooden stairs. No more figures lurking, sticking mine notes on the furniture. I still receive a regular share of the profits from the Sentinel Protocol patent, but I don't need to spend it all on myself. Instead, I founded the Alara Foundation for the Erased Women, a fund for women who have had their names erased from their own hard work and achievements. No galas, no red carpets. Just a bank account, a few invitation letters, and dozens of radiant faces as they receive scholarships, investments, or simply public recognition. Outside the apartment door, I hung a small wooden sign, made from the trunk of the old almond tree that Alex and I had once planted. This home was funded by a burden. Enjoy the quiet. The mail carrier always reads it out loud and laughs, as if understanding a part of the story. On my refrigerator, there is only one thing: a scrawled drawing with a purple marker on an old piece of cardboard. It shows a woman wearing glasses standing next to a giant light bulb with a wobbly line of text underneath. "Grandma thinks faster than Google." The handwriting of my youngest nephew, drawn many years ago, before they taught him to ignore my presence. I almost threw that drawing away, on a dark day when they told me I was losing my mind, that I should be quiet and sit still. But I didn't, because it reminded me that I had never stopped thinking. If someone were to ask me now, "How does your story end?" I would say, "It doesn't. I just took back the pen to write the next chapter myself." And I know, somewhere out there, other women, those who were once seen as shadows, are preparing to do the same.